Welcome to the OCI Grails Quickcast, bite-sized portions of Grails productivity tips to help maximize developer productivity with the framework. Grails Quickcasts are brought to you by OCI, the home of the core Grails development team and your source for professional support, project work, and training around the Grails framework. Grails Quickcasts are distributed in partnership with dzone, who help build knowledge and relationships to maximize your success.
Hello, my name is Sergio Del Amo. I am a member of the Grails OCI team. I wanted to talk to you about logging in a Grails 3 application. If you are still using Grails 2, in Grails 2 we used log4j for logging. In Grails 3 we have moved to logback. By default, when you create a Grails 3 application, I have created a Grails 3.2.10 application, which is the latest stable release of Grails at the time of the Quickcast. You get automatically a logback.groovy configuration file in the folder Grails app /conf. I have a couple of services, a controller and a domain class in my application. One of the things that the frameworks offer us is when you have an artifact such as a controller or a service, the framework automatically injects a log property for us, so we can call log.debug immediately without configuring anything. I have log statements as well in the services that the controller uses. If we were to start this application, we will still not see anything. We will need to configure loggers for the controllers and the services. Let me do that. So I'm gonna say, okay, I want to log Grails app controllers demo. I'm gonna say I want to use the level debug, and I want to supply a list of appenders. In my case, it's gonna be the standard output appender, which is configured in the log configuration file, which is created by the framework, which is a console appender. I'm gonna set adivity to false. And I'm gonna create the same statement for the service. This package prefix convention comes from the old days of Grails, where we used to have even controllers without a package. So at that time it makes sense to use such a prefix. I'm gonna start the application. While the application starts, let's talk briefly about adivity. Adivity is better explained with the logback manual. So in chapter 2 of the logback manual, in the architecture chapter, you will find a section about adivity. Basically, this sentence summarizes. It says the output of a log statement of a particular logger will go to all the appenders in that logger and its ancestors. Check out the documentation. It's better explained with this example of the table than me talking. So adivity has its use cases. In this screencast we're going to set adivity to false, but be sure to check it out in the documentation. Back to our application. Another parameter that we can configure is the log level. We have several log levels: off, error, warn, info, and debug. When you set up debug, that means that the levels such as info, warn, and error will be outputted as well. So it's debug and upper levels. Application has started. Let me open the application. Invoke the controller. We have in our console output the debug statement in the controller and 2 info statements for each of the services. We have big changes in Grails 3.3. So this is how you will configure such loggers names in Grails 3.2 or lower. In Grails 3.3 I have here an application, the same application with Grails 3.3.0, which is currently milestone 2. In my logback configuration I will just have the package name, I don't need to add the prefixes. So this will be for Grails 3.3 or smaller or lower. In Grails 3.3 we will use just the demo. We believe that this is a more natural logger name for new users to the framework. If you are using the SLA4J annotation in Grails artifacts, you will need to use such a logger name as well. So it basically sets the same logger name whether you are using SLA4J or not, which is a nice feature as well. The only capability that you may lose is you could, for example, say something like this in a Grails 2 application where you were logging with a debug level all your controllers. You will no longer be able to do that in a Grails 3.3.x automatically, but you could, for example, put all your controllers in a package name. We believe this change makes a lot of sense. It will make easier to grasp logging for configuration for new users, and we hope you like it as well. Let me go back to the sample application, the Grails 3.3.210, 3.210. I have a Groovy class which is not a Grails artifacts, is a plain Groovy class. The easiest way to get a log property in a non-Grails artifact is to annotate your class with the transform SLA4J. Let me go to the documentation of the transform. So it says this local transform adds a logging ability to your program using logback logging, and every method call on an unbound variable named log will be mapped to the call to the logger. For this, a log field will be inserted into the class. So if you want to use from a non-Grails artifact, the transform SLA4J is your best ally here. If we wanted to log to get the statement from such a class, you will need to add something like demo.com info that Mr. Prefixer class is in that package. If we wanted, for example, to log everything in that particular package but not in that class, we want to silence the logging of the Mr. Prefixer class, we could do something like this. And we will use off here. So this configuration, we will see logs of other classes in the demo.com package, but we will not see any log statements in the Mr. Prefixer class. SLA4J annotation has another big advantage, which is a feature they call parameterized logging, which boosts logging performance for disabled logging statements. This is better explained with an example. So let's say you had here a statement such as prefixing at, and we are going to have two parameters. One is going to be the string and the other is going to be the date. Let's say year, month, day, hour, minute. So let's say we don't want to pay the penalty cost of instantiating a date object and formatting when we are not logging with level info. So what SLA4J is going to do for us is basically going to wrap this call into such a code. So if the log level info is not enabled, we are not going to instantiate this parameter. So this is a nice SLA4J benefit, which will improve the performance of your application. If you are using heavily parameters in your log statements and you don't want to pay the cost of instantiating those parameters when the log level is not the one in the statement, then SLA4J comes to the rescue. Another thing I wanted to talk to you is about configuring new appenders. By default, we have the standard output appender here, which is a console appender configured for us. We have a nice blog post in the OCI Grails team blog, which is named Configuring Rolling Logging with Logback. What's rolling logging? The first sentence here defines it better. So log files are rolled over and scheduled and archived at a certain point. So when you go into production, you probably don't want to log to console or to Tomcat standard Catalina.out. You probably want to have a more sophisticated rolling logging system where you, for example, log every day to a one file, and that file is changed by another file when a particular size of the file is reached, or when the history of the days of the file is reached. It's really easy to configure in such an appender with Logback. We have an example here in the blog, so I'm gonna copy this appender configuration. I'm gonna put it here in my project. I'm gonna set the home dir. Basically what we want to do is we want to log to a file instead of to the console. I'm gonna create a folder here in the root of my project. So I'm gonna set, I want to place the logs here. So the logs are gonna be in home directory logs, and then this file name pattern will basically create a logging file per minute. In a production, you probably don't want a log file per minute. You probably want something like a log per month or a log per day, depending on your traffic. Check out the Logback documentation for these options. I really explain there. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, okay, instead of logging to the standard output, let's log to the rolling appender, and I'm gonna start the application again. So what I expect now is I expect to see logs here under the logs folder. So there is like a log per minute. If I execute my endpoint now, I will see log statements coming to that file. Let me go back to the project. And there you go. One thing I wanted to talk to you before I forget is another benefit of using SLA4j is helping the IDE. For example, here IntelliJ is complaining, even though you have seen that this is compiling and it's working. We executed the application before and we saw the login statement coming nicely. If we annotated this with SLA4j, the IDE will understand better and we will no longer have that error. Indeed, in previous versions of Grails, I have, for example, the same application here written with Grails 3.1.0. This will not even compile. So, as you have seen, SLA4j has several benefits. There are several plugins quite used in the ecosystem, such as the Spring Security Core plugin or the Spring Security REST plugin, which use SLA4j heavily. I personally use a lot SLA4j, and I will recommend you to use SLA4j. Just remember, if you use the transformation, you will need to use the package name here instead of the Grails app controllers prefix. In Grails 3.3 this is gone, so you will not need to remember anything, and you will basically go with the package for the logger name. Yeah, as you have seen, this is not compiling in previous versions of Grails, so it will be common to see such a statement in a version of Grails such as Grails 3.1.0. The last thing I wanted to talk to you was about the external configuration. By default, you have the logback.groovy configuration file here inside Grails application conf. If I want to move it outside of the project, when I want to have an external file, I can do that. I will move the the configuration file to the root of my project. So I have it. Let me see if I move it correctly. I moved the completely conf folder. Let me move the conf folder back to its placement. What I want to move is just the logback.groovy file. So that's better. So we have it here. I have three options for using this external configuration file. So one option is to edit application.yaml and use the setting login config, and then I can say something like this is in, let me see my folder. This will be one option. Another option will be to start the application using something like using a system property, so something like this. You can use the system property login.config, supply where do you have the external configuration file and write boot run. And the latest option will be you could define let me copy here what is here. So you could define environment variable. You could say something like login config to 10, and then I could start the application with the boot run, and the app will pick this external configuration file thanks to this environment variable. When you are using an external configuration file, it's really useful to use the scan feature as well. If you use something like this, your application will check periodically for changes in the configuration file so that you can tune up or tune down the levels of the login depending on your requirements. Check out the logback configuration for scan. You can configure, for example, if you want your file to be scanned every minute or every 10 minutes or every hour. That's everything I wanted to tell you. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your Grails 3 development. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of the OCI Grails Quickcast. For more information on how OCI can help you with Grails or any of these other practice areas, visit ociweb.com or contact us at info@ociweb.com. Follow our Twitter accounts @Object Computing and @Grails Framework. Also, read regular updates on the OCI Grails team blog at grailsblog.ociweb.com.